He keeps getting me into events that he attaches importance to, and that I think I have to give him full credit for my trio of appearances at Straightpath School events. I've been able to attend two in person, as you pointed out, Mohammed Rafiq. I'm now doing a third one. And I want to greet at the beginning Munawar Ali, Mohammed Rafiq, the good principal, faculty, administrators, parents, and students of Straightpath School who are connected to this video webinar. I was delighted to hear about this initiative by Straightpath to actually, may I suggest that some of you might want to mute your mics so that your sound doesn't come into mine. It may give a clearer sound to the others. I just want to say that I thought it was a wonderful initiative by Straightpath to come up with this bibliotherapy idea, encouraging parents to set up home libraries for their children at school. It has worried me for some time now that reading for our young children of today is no longer associated with pleasure as it was for the young children of my day. Reading today is associated and linked in people's minds with textbooks and studying. So it's lost in the drudgery of day-to-day school affairs. And when it comes to pleasure, many children today would rather look at a screen, looking at their PlayStation or their Nintendo, or at, of course, their computer or laptop, or the very least, their mobile phones. And I think that this is a big mistake that successive generations of parents and teachers have allowed themselves to make. That is, by telling children that books are something they must read rather than something that they might enjoy reading. And I believe that there is still time to remedy the situation, so long as we are quick enough to recognize the fault. Let me talk a little bit about my own childhood, because that is what has taught me the value of reading. Growing up in urban India in the late 50s, 60s, early 70s, in Bombay, Calcutta, and Delhi, my generation was probably the last generation that could read without the threat of other distractions. Television did not exist in the Bombay of my boyhood. Nintendo was not even a gleam in an inventor's eye. And of course, computers, laptops, and mobile phones had not even been imagined. And if your siblings were, as in my case, 4 and 6 years younger than me, and that too female, so they played with their own friends, there was only one thing I could do, and especially given the fact that I was an asthmatic child, often confined to bed, there was only one thing I could do, and that was to read. So reading was my escape, my education, and my distraction. At the same time, it was the entertainment that all children look for. I read copiously, rapidly, indiscriminately. Chronic asthma often confined me to bed, but I found so much pleasure in the books piled up by my bedside that I stopped resenting my illness. I remember my mother coming into my room around 11 every night and switching off the light. I wasn't smart enough to think of holding a flashlight or a torch under the covers, but sometimes I would wait for my parents to fall asleep in their room and then surreptitiously switch my light on again to finish the book that they had interrupted. And the reason this is important, I would say, is that the journey that begins the adventure of reading is often ignited by a single book. And so when I encourage parents to create a home library, I would encourage them to have a wide range of books of different levels, of different themes, of different kinds of subjects. Some may interest their children, some may not interest their children. But the moment they realize how much pleasure there is in a book they like, they will themselves want to go out and get more along those lines. My mother started me off on my reading journey because when I was barely 2 years old, she would read to me from the noddy books of Enid Blyton, stories about a nodding wooden doll and his friends in Toyland. My mother jokes that she read them so badly that I couldn't wait to grab the books from her myself And by the time I was 3, I was reading Noddy, soon moving to other stories by Enid Blyton, who was the world's most prolific children's author with more than 200 books to her name. And literally reading Enid Blyton could take you through an entire childhood. She did everything from fairy tales to myths and legends to adventure stories, the famous 5, the secret 7. In fact, she inspired not only my reading, but my initial writing, because I started writing imitative stories about the 6 solvers, who are a bunch of Indian kids going to a village in Kerala and having adventures very similar to what Enid Blyton's children were having in her books. And that sort of experience, I think, is something that lasts a lifetime. I read a lot of other books. I'm not going to waste all of your time, but a lot of them were purely for pleasure. There were war stories, stories of adventures, the Biggles books about an intrepid fighter pilot. And then inevitably you move towards more serious reading. Lamb's Tales from Shakespeare, which summarize the Shakespeare stories accessibly. Charles Dickens, I remember reading Oliver Twist at the age of 10. And then I remember, I don't know whether you still have this and whether you have it at Straightpath, but when I was a kid, there was in order to test or improve our spellings, we had a dictation session at school where the teacher would dictate a passage, the children would have to write out the passage, and the teacher would spelling mistakes. And a teacher I wasn't particularly fond of, and he wasn't very fond of me, dictated a passage from P.G. Wodehouse at a spelling test. And he launched me on the first great passion of my life, because I went to him after the dictation test and said, can you tell me where that passage is from? He gave me the title. I promptly went and borrowed that book from the library. I still remember it. It was The Indiscretions of Archie by P.G. Wodehouse. And I loved his humor and his style so much that I ended up reading every one of the 95 books he wrote in the remaining years of my teenage. I finished them all, and the pleasure he gave me will last a lifetime. And then, of course, there are lots of Indian stories, Indian classics, stories about Akbar and Birbal, stories of Tenali Raman, stories of the epics, the Ramayana and the Mahabharata, stories of the ancient Jatakas, the Panchatantra. There's so much one can read. I've been giving references of Western works, but certainly there's a lot of good material in English available from Indian sources, going back to our distant past and also new modern writers. And I want to say to parents, there is no reason to be ashamed of good quality illustrated books, comic books. I know that people tend to disapprove, saying that the children will never become serious readers if they spend their time with their noses dipped in comic books. But if you think of something like Tintin, the Tintin stories of the Belgian writer Hergé, they're brilliantly illustrated, extremely well written, very well plotted, and to this day they can stand the equal of any adult novel. The same with the Asterix comics, which imagine a world in which one Gaulish village is resisting the Roman Empire. This is centuries before Christ. But it's done so brilliantly with such a sense of humor that children will laugh and be amused and entertained, but they will also unwittingly learn a lot. Why do I talk about the importance of learning? Because ultimately, the great advantage of books as opposed to cinema or watching television is that they are a genuinely interactive experience. Most visual entertainment is passive. It tells you by showing you everything you need to know. There is no additional scope for the human imagination. With a book, you have to read the descriptions by the author and imagine for yourself. Your mind has to work, painting those words into pictures in your mind. Books also can transport you to worlds that exist or did not exist, that do not exist now, that may never have existed, that give you an opportunity to conceive of experiences you have never had and to share opportunities to expand your mental horizons in ways that very few other things can do. I once wrote in a book about reading, the pleasures of reading, a book I wrote called Bookless in Baghdad. I wrote about the whole reason why one should read. And I said, ultimately, it's like a book is like a toddy tapper's hatchet because it cuts through the rough husk that enshrouds our minds to tap into the exhilaration that ferments beneath. And that, to my mind, is the best tool that you can give your child. You, by setting up a home library, parents, by encouraging them to read different kinds of books, you will not only give them what I mentioned, escape, education, and entertainment, you will also give them an opportunity to enjoy vicarious experience through the experiences, the lives, the ideas, and the words of other people. Reading biographies about other lives can be inspiring. Reading other people's ideas may ignite new ideas in your own mind. Reading descriptions of other places may also inspire you to make your own place better, as well as to travel to other places. There are so many different things that can happen through books that as parents, educators, and mentors, we must all create these opportunities for our children. We must make reading fun again. Give children an opportunity. I often said, I remember a mother complaining to me that her son, who at that point I think was 12 or 13 years old, simply wasn't interested in books. The only books he read were his school homework. So I said, what is he interested in? Oh, she said, he's very interested in football. He watches football all the time. So I said to her, buy him a book on football. Buy him a book about the World Cup in football, or about the great football heroes of recent years, or a book about football records. And you will find that he discovers a book can be a source of pleasure and not just of instruction. And she did that. And a year or so later, she told me, it worked. So I'm hoping that all of you listening to this will turn to this opportunity, get children to realize that aside from their homework, their required reading, their school books, there is a great deal of pleasure to be had out of reading books at home. I think there's no question that good books will stimulate the minds of your children. We must aim at piquing the child's curiosity, and then the path will be paved for them to begin their own adventure of reading. Thank you very much for inviting me to this very special occasion. And I'm very proud indeed to officially inaugurate the Home Library Campaign, the bibliotherapy program of the Straightpath School. Thank you very much. All the best. Good luck to all of you.